Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about the atmosphere. The atmosphere being the layer of air or layers of air that surround the Earth. The atmosphere is broken down into 5 different layers, and you can see from this diagram the 5 different layers. The layer closest to the Earth is the Troposphere. Next one out, Stratosphere, Mesosphere, Thermosphere, and then the Exosphere. And we're going to talk about these various layers and a couple of their characteristics, and we're going to talk about them working from closest to Earth on out towards space. So we have 5 layers. Why do we have 5 layers as opposed just to one large layer? Well, we divide these layers up into 5 different sections based upon 2 major categories: air pressure, which is simply the amount of air in that layer, and temperature. The closer we are to Earth, the more air there is, the greater the air pressure. As we get further and further away from Earth, there's less and less air, therefore there's less air pressure. And temperature really depends upon how thick the layer is, if there's certain category or certain characteristics that layer may contain, such as ozone and so forth, that help kind of either trap in heat or release heat. So you'll see as you go through the notes that the temperature will either increase or decrease based upon the particular layer. So let's talk about the 5 layers. The first layer is the troposphere, and we'll talk about a couple of characteristics of each layer. So troposphere, that is the layer that is closest to the Earth. That is the layer that we all live in, obviously being on the Earth's surface, is in the troposphere. That's where we have our water cycle. All of our weather is contained in the troposphere. Clouds, rain, whatever it is, weather, that is in the troposphere, that layer closest to Earth. It's also one of the thinnest layers of the atmosphere. Working our way outwards, so we have the troposphere. The next layer above that, working towards space, is the stratosphere. So the stratosphere is the next layer up. A couple characteristics of the stratosphere. This is where we have most of our commercial air traffic. Okay, airliners, planes fly through this layer of the atmosphere. If you've ever been on an airplane and gone from one point to another, you see that you go up through the clouds and eventually you're flying above the clouds. 2 major reasons for that. One, you just get out of the weather, so it's a smoother ride in that airplane. You're not flying through the weather, you're not flying through the clouds. Number 2, as you get above the troposphere into the stratosphere, the air is a little bit thinner, so the planes can fly faster and easier because there's less friction. So that's why we find a lot of our air traffic in this particular layer of the atmosphere. Another characteristic of this layer is ozone. At the very top of the stratosphere, we find the ozone layer. Ozone is very important to us because it blocks out UV light and radiation. Talk real briefly about ozone. Ozone, again, being at the top of the stratosphere. So the ozone is not necessarily a separate layer in and of itself. It's part of the stratosphere. But the ozone is a gaseous layer that protects the Earth from UV radiation, okay, ultraviolet light, UV light. So very important. The sun sends in these UV light, this UV radiation, and you can see from our diagram right here, the ozone being right here, that sun's light comes in and a lot of that bounces off the ozone layer back out into space, and it protects us from that radiation light. We still get a lot of UV light, not all of it bounces off, but a good portion does. So the ozone being a very important part of the stratosphere. Third layer is the mesosphere. So again, we're working closer towards space. A big characteristic of the mesosphere is this is the layer that we find a lot of meteors that burn up in the atmosphere. So little rocks are coming from outer space towards the Earth. They hit the mesosphere and they start to burn up due to the amount of friction. The air is just thick enough to create friction from these really fast-moving rocks that they burn up and don't hardly ever make it to the surface of the Earth. Next one, again, working towards space, is the 4th layer, is the thermosphere. Okay, the thermosphere is where we find these phenomenon called the aurora borealis. Okay, we have these curtains of light, and it's because the light comes from a lot of light comes from the sun, but a lot of it is the solar waves that come from the sun, the solar flares that come from the sun, and they're illuminated in this layer, the atmosphere. Then we have the fifth layer. This is by far the obviously the furthest one out, the exosphere. It's the one closest towards space. It is the thinnest layer, and this is where we find our satellites orbiting the Earth. Not a whole lot of air there. Very, 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 very thin. Just a little bit of air. And again, finding our satellites in this particular area of the atmosphere. All right, so real quickly, the components of our air. Our air is made up of many different gases. We find that our air is made up of mostly nitrogen. A lot of people think that all of our air is oxygen. It's not. Only about 21% of our air is actually oxygen. And then we have carbon dioxide, hydrogen, and argon that also make up the air that we breathe. So it's not just pure oxygen. A lot of it, vast majority of it, is actually nitrogen that you're breathing in the air that we breathe. But obviously our body doesn't need the nitrogen, it needs the oxygen. And that's where we get that right there. Okay, and then lastly, wind. Let's talk briefly about wind, because wind is a big portion of our air that we breathe. And wind is simply caused by the uneven heating and cooling of the earth, which then in turn heats and cools the air. And we know that hot air rises and cool air descends. So when the air comes across warm ground, it is heated and it begins to rise, but as it goes up in altitude, okay, it starts to cool and therefore it descends. And then we get this cycle, we get this circle, and then obviously when the air is coming across the surface from this cooling, descending, and rising, we have wind. Okay, go back and review these different layers. You will not be asked to know specific pieces of information like temperatures or how thick the particular layer of the atmosphere is. You will need to know the basic characteristics, and you will need to know the correct order of the layers of the atmosphere. So make sure that you see that, and you remember that we start from the Earth, okay, and work our way outward. So we have the troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and then exosphere.